Hey everyone, my name's Ed Park and I'm the founder of NeuroReserve, and today we are going to do an Instagram Live with Dr. Thomas Holland, who is one of our medical and scientific advisors, but more primarily he is a researcher and physician at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, and he spends a lot of his time studying the mind diet and its impact on brain health. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about vitamin D, we're going to talk about flavonols, we'll talk about the mind diet and how that relates to neuropathology, and so we'll have Tom define that for us. And the reason why we're going to be covering this is because over the past, I'd say just 3 months, Rush University has been on a roll releasing new information, new data, just month by month by month, just putting out a lot of new information on dietary factors and Alzheimer's and dementia, and they've been making a lot of news in a lot of places, and we're here to dive into it. So without further ado, I'm gonna ask Tom or All right.
Hey, did that work?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So, good evening in Chicago, I take it?
Yeah. It's nice. We actually had a really great day with regards to weather. About 50s, so rarity for us here.
Okay, all right. So about the same here in Southern Nevada. So,
Very nice, very
I figure, we first start out by just having you just introduce yourself briefly, and then
Yeah.
and then we can dive into these different studies that have come out in rapid succession over the past few months from
Absolutely.
Rush, from you and your colleagues over there. So why don't you start out by giving just a little bit about yourself, and
Yeah, for sure.
we'll go. Yeah.
My name's Tom Holland. It'll be difficult to find me online because British Tom Holland, Spider-Man, just kind of took the reins on that one.
Yeah.
But I'm a physician, right? I'm a physician scientist at Rush. I do a multitude of research, but I finished my medical degree in 2016. Ended up doing a postdoctoral fellowship with Martha Claire Morris thereafter, and since have been doing research into different dietary components and their association to various brain health outcomes, be it cognition, Alzheimer's, dementia, as well as the Alzheimer's disease neuropathologies. And so after that, became an instructor, and now am an assistant professor, and just continue to do research, teach, and try to get out and do as much public speaking as possible, just kind of spread the word and get a lot of the new science out there as much as possible.
That's great. Yeah. And also, I don't think you mentioned that you're like an avid weightlifter as well, right?
I'm finally getting back into it. I was able to do about 200 on my incline bench press today, so I was pretty pleased.
Nice. All right. So, so I wanted to get into these because, they've been just making a lot of news lately, a lot of news about vitamin D. And I know you and your colleagues released a study back in late 2022 on it. And why don't you start by just telling us about that study and what was learned, what insight came out of that with respect to vitamin D, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Vitamin D is a really intriguing vitamin. So in particular, you have a 25 dihydroxyvitamin D3. And so you get this, hydroxyvitamin D3. And so that's the inactive form. And then it goes to the kidneys and it becomes activated via either a 1-alpha hydroxylase, or it can become inactivated via 24-alpha hydroxylase. And that becomes the active form that then goes into tissue and can either help with deposition of calcium, help with bone mineralization, things like that. And but vitamin D is one of those interesting vitamins in that it can be formed from sunlight, as well as intake from the diet. So, I always talk with my students as we're discussing their career goals and moving through their career, what to look out for with regards to vitamin D deficiencies. So in particular, as mentioned, the sun is going to be one of your primary sources for vitamin D. And if you aren't in the sun very much, you could have the potential for deficiency. If you're an elder individual that is not, out and about a whole lot, that can be where that kind of falls in. And then for people that have darker skin, black and brown individuals, it's going to take a bit more time in the sun to get the same level of vitamin D as somebody that's quite, in my opinion, I'm pale. But it wouldn't take a whole lot of time in the sun for me to turn red, but to also get my vitamin D. So there's a fair bit that can lead to vitamin D deficiencies. So just being very cognizant, and then also being in northern climates where it's cloudy and not actually having sun exposure. So, we see actually a fair bit of vitamin D deficiency in elder individuals in the Chicagoland area, and have to be very diligent about correcting vitamin D deficiencies.
And so what I guess what you and your colleagues did is you took people. I mean, there's a lot of this I guess I wouldn't say circumstantial, but a lot of observational, epidemiological information that's come out that links vitamin D to long-term brain health outcomes. But I guess what your team did is you actually went into the actual brains of people who had passed away as part of your research. There are many people who contribute their brains to the research that you're doing, right? And you look at
so with
the
our
vitamin D
partners
levels in the brain. So
yes.
Okay.
So with our partners out of Tufts, we had postmortem brain samples sent and analyzed to look at the concentration of the various types of vitamin D in the brain itself, and we found that this higher level of the 25 hydroxyvitamin D3 was associated with a slower rate of cognitive decline. Now, the interesting thing, again, with vitamin D is the mechanisms by which it's moving through the blood-brain barrier. Also, this aspect of how a 25 hydroxyvitamin D3 gets activated. We know that microglia have the potential to activate vitamin D. So it does become a question of, did it get activated and then it's used as this active form? Is it just that we have this abundance of, a relatively inert form that's readily available for the body to use, especially the brain? So it does become intriguing, and you answer one question and 10 more questions pop up.
So you're saying that, well, we don't know if the vitamin D got in there already activated, or whether or not it got activated in the brain by the microglia, which are the immune cells in the brain, right? So, but at least we know something's happening with vitamin D in there. I think that's a nice, insight in the fact that you actually looked in the brains of people.
And we did see that there was 125, so the active form of vitamin D was in the brain, but the concentration levels were quite low. So it made it a bit more difficult to really interpret those analyses. But as you're saying, we know that vitamin D is doing something in the brain, and especially with regards to kind of neural protection.
I'm looking at the abstract here, and I guess the concentrations of that vitamin D were associated with anywhere from 25 to 33% lower risk of dementia. So that's interesting, and I guess that I think that's more to add to the story of vitamin D.
Yeah, and again, with a lot of these actual brain tissue analyses, it becomes very intriguing as to how you approach those, because you have to be cognizant of this precious tissue that you're using. Once that tissue is used,
Yeah.
that's it. So we have to be very cognizant about the tissue that we're taking in, the tissue that we're essentially destroying to determine the concentration levels, where we're taking samples from. So, but in the end, what it really does allow us is we can say that, although we don't know definitively the action or how it's functioning, we do know that it is beneficial for cognition.
Now, there's a couple questions that came in.
Yeah.
One is, what else can cause vitamin D deficiency besides the lack of sunlight and pigment in the skin? And then the specific question of that is, can being vegan or dairy contribute to vitamin D deficiency?
So diet certainly can. So having a poor diet can impact your D levels. So we primarily think of the predominant aspects of D coming in from the sun. So again, pigment variations, type of clothing that you wear, northern climate versus more closer to the equator. But to that end, certainly having balanced diet is important. So, we do see, as I mentioned, a fair amount of elderly individuals in the Chicagoland area that will have vitamin D deficiencies, and they'll be thrown on, a D and calcium by their primary care physician just to make sure that they do have the appropriate levels. Because then if you have this aspect of low calcium, low vitamin D, you then run the risk of increased fracture capability and things like that. So it's very important, again, from a just overall dietary perspective, to be balanced and
I think
have good levels.
Yeah, when I think about dairy-free, I think about typically milk is fortified with vitamin D. So there's, I think if someone's dairy-free, they might be missing out on that, maybe ancillary type of source of vitamin D. And I guess putting it all together, from what you said there, if a person doesn't get enough sunlight, they have really dark pigment in their skin, they're dairy-free, and I guess if they don't have not much fish either, right?
Yeah.
Fish is one dietary source of vitamin D. Yeah. Then you might be in trouble, right?
Yeah, definitely. Trying to be very cognizant about your intake, sun exposure. Again, we do see this in, say, nursing homes. There may not be as much, just exposure. So. Yeah.
Oh, and I think also it's worth it to mention to people who live in very, very sunny climates like here, Southern Nevada, Phoenix area. There are people who get out a lot, there's plenty of sun, but then there's a whole host of a segment of people who stay indoors because they don't want that, extreme heat, right? And so it could be just as susceptible to
absolutely. I enjoy the sun, but I fear the sun. I have a healthy fear.
Okay. Well, here's and one more question is, what is is it recommended to combine vitamin K with vitamin D?
With regards to combining, you certainly can. All of them are fat-soluble vitamins, so A, D, E, and K. And K is going to do a host of other things with regards to functionality. We primarily think of vitamin K as helping out with the clotting factors. If any scientists are out there, 2, 7, 9, 10, protein C and protein S. But there are, a couple other studies that have shown associations with vitamin K and cognition. We didn't see anything in particular with vitamin K in the brain tissue samples. But again, with how we're sourcing the actual tissue, it does raise a question as to metabolite viability So again, with these brains,
okay.
you know, not all of them are immediately, say, fresh. So some of them are frozen, and then we do a thaw cycle. And then when we're looking at the thawing, freezing and thawing of tissue just in general can lead to degradation of different nutrients or just cell types. So that does raise another question of, you know, just what exactly is going on. But you know, we know that all the fat-soluble vitamins are good for just overall health and brain health. So.
Okay. All right. So how about this? Let's try Flavonols now. Let's go into Flavonols because that was just last month. You know, study, and you were primary author on that. So when it comes to Flavonols and brain outcomes, what was studied here? I know it was cognition, right? And different aspects of cognition, and there's so many different ways we use our brains, basically.
Yes.
And so maybe a good place to start is, you know, what are Flavonols and their unique little group of phytonutrients from plants, and also what you studied here, and what was the insight out of that study?
Yeah, so this is it's a burgeoning area. It's been around. Flavonoids have been around for a good while, but kind of parsing out the individual subclasses and even further the constituents is newer in the last 10 to 15 years. And so you have this broad category of flavonoids, which, as you mentioned, are found in both fruits and vegetables. They are known to have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties. And then for the subclasses, there's flavonols, which is Flavonols, which is what I studied. And there's also a flavanols with a Flava, and that's now called flavonols to help with some of the confusion. There's also anthocyanidins, flavones, and flavonones. So in this study in particular, I looked at the subgroup flavonols, which are found in dark leafy greens, tomatoes, onions, olive oil, tea, wine. So just a host of foods, but in particular dark leafy greens. So your spinach, kale, arugula, romaine. And our outcome that we measured was cognition. So we had a 19 cognitive battery assessment, which allowed us to, you know, compile a Z-score and look at a global cognition. And we also had domains. So we're talking semantic memory, perceptual speed, visual spatial memory, episodic memory, and working memory. So
19 different tests, cognitive tests. So okay, so that's a massive battery, right, of tests.
Yes, it is.
And okay, and so here, just for people who want to know here, you might have heard these, or maybe absolutely not. Okay, so the flavonols that you studied are called camphorol, myricetin, quercetin, and isorhamnetin. So I think the only one maybe people might have heard of in the regular world might be quercetin.
Oh, really? Well, that is the more predominant one in wine. Camphorol's gotten a bit of press, if you will. But yeah, so in this study in particular, we looked at total flavonols, their association to global cognition, as well as these cognitive domains. And then we took each individual flavanol and then parsed them out individually, and then looked at the outcomes again of global cognition and these cognitive domains. So when we're talking about cognition as well, we're talking about a decrease in the rate of cognitive decline. So trying to decrease the slope at which somebody is on this trajectory or path of decline. And so with that, you know, the study's been out for a bit, so we had some really great associated results. And we found that total flavonols was associated with a 32% decrease in the rate of cognitive decline for global cognition.
Okay,
and,
so if you're heading at 100 miles an hour towards decline, again, that kind of happens as we age, right? You slowed it down by 33 miles per hour, which is good.
More or less.
Very good.
Which, and again, these are all, cohort study type data. So it makes it, we can say that there's association. We can say that we see that there's a connection there. We don't know because there isn't an RCT on flavonols. But we know that there's something there, and we start to put together a picture, if you will. So my manuscript from 2020 looked at flavonols and risk of Alzheimer's dementia. And with that one, we found that the highest quintile of intake of flavonols was associated with a risk reduction of 48% in Alzheimer's dementia risk. So now we've got 2 studies that are looking at the Alzheimer's dementia, so the most detrimental component of dementia. And we also have a study looking at the stepwise cognitive loss of function there. And so then it starts to, put the story together, and it starts to look kind of solid as a story.
Exactly. I love how they build on each other and they keep going. And I love how you just you broke open basically this field, this tiny sliver, right, of overall flavonoids, right, called flavonols. You dove in, and the impact that they're showing is huge. So that's
well, and it's again intriguing because we usually think of nutrients as being these vitamins and minerals that some are essential, some can be made by the body, but for these phytonutrients or bioactives, they haven't been really thought of as being essential. They're just a part of these fruits and vegetables, and we're getting them through intake, but they haven't been necessarily looked at. They're kind of outside of this nutrient category. And that being said, I am certainly standing on the shoulders of giants when it comes to my research. So many people have come before me that have allowed me to even move this direction. But, very exciting to be involved with this research and really help move the science forward.
Yeah. Okay, and now, so it's kind of funny because we started with vitamin D, a very specific nutrient or vitamin, right? And then we move into this group called flavonols. And now I guess we're going to get into a whole diet level, right? Mind diet, because just literally, I think a week ago, was published a paper by colleagues of yours over at Rush on neuropathology and how it relates to the mind diet and also the Mediterranean diet, I believe.
Yeah.
And I guess the first question to ask, I guess, is what are neuropathologies?
Yes.
The first thing.
Yes. So neuropathologies are going to be various insults to the brain. So this could be either, for a lot of people, they'll think of stroke. So that would be typically speaking, an occlusion of the vessel, where you have blockage of blood flow to an area of the brain, and then that area of the brain has damage and potentially dies. So when we think about Alzheimer's type neuropathology, we're talking about deposition of the neuritic plaques, which is going to be A beta 40 and 42, so amyloid peptide, as well as the neurofibrillary tangles, which are hyperphosphorylated tau proteins. And, the reason that these are impactful on memory is that they're particularly depositing in the memory centers of the brain. And there's disruption of synapses, neuronal loss, inflammation, as well as oxidative stress that occurs that can all cause damage or death to some of these brain cells.
Mm-hmm. So in the past, studies have been done, obviously the groundbreaking mind diet studies where, you looked at diagnosis, risk of diagnosis of Alzheimer's if you adhere really well to the mind diet, or look at cognitive decline, right? The rate at which, our cognition declines with the mind diet. But here it looks like you're looking at, okay, now let's look at these plaques and let's look at these tangles, right? And I don't know, what was found here?
So I'll preface this in case people don't recall the mind diet. So my mentor and the individual that brought me on, Dr. Martha Claire Morris, along with a Dr. Chrissy Tagney, developed the mind diet. And so 15 categories. We're now at 14, just to be very cognizant of kind of where alcohol lies with things, of not knowing where amounts of alcohol are for cognitive health. But that being said, the mind diet was associated with decreased rates of cognition that were equivalent to a brain age of about 7.5 years younger if you were adhering to the highest tertile of mind diet, which was a score of about 9.5 to 12.5. And then Dr. Morris looked at the mind diet and risk of Alzheimer's dementia and found a decrease in the risk by 53%. And so then my colleague, Pooja Agarwal, extended that and looked at the neuropathology and found a decrease in risk of overall global AD burden. So just both the neurofibrillary tangles as well as amyloid, and then found a specific association with amyloid. And so the intriguing thing with all of this is they were able to look at brain age and neuropathology and equate the decrease in the neuropathology to what that brain age would be. And so individuals that adhered to the highest quintile of Mediterranean diet had a brain age of about 18 years younger with regards to neuropath. For the mind diet, it was 12 years. And the more intriguing one for me is that so then they took the mind diet and then separated it out into the categories and found that leafy green intake, so the highest level of leafy green intake, was associated with a brain age of someone 19 years younger.
Okay. And by the way,
intense.
The leafy greens have a lot of flavonols, by the way.
Yeah.
Coincidentally,
so
and we can't draw
it's
a direct line, but that's just interesting to know.
Yeah. So it's really, again, intriguing to think about the level of flavanol intake as well, because when I reverse engineered my level of flavanol intake to figure out the serving size of leafy greens, it exactly matches the mind diet of 1 serving of dark leafy greens per day will give you the highest quintile of intake of flavonols.
Yeah. So that's great,
Yeah.
So the funny thing here is that, you're saying that the mind diet, the Mediterranean diet, your intake of leafy green vegetables makes a huge impact on the amount of neuropathology. So these plaques that kind of grow or kind of proliferate.
I think deposit would probably be
that's the deposit in the brain.
Well, especially with Last of Us going on right now.
Yeah. And so, I think about the new drug that came out for Alzheimer's disease called lecanemab, and of course, it was designed to remove those amyloid plaques from the brain. So, I think it's fair to say that instead of getting to that point, if we just adhere well to these diets, that's truly is food as medicine, because you're going to do the same thing, except you just won't let it ever build up, Yeah. So it's very intriguing. And, it's, for me, the monoclonal antibodies, they show a lot of promise. But as we're discussing with regards to dementia, and when we talk about, neuroresilience and neuroplasticity, there becomes this, thought around what the pathology is and what the translation into the clinical syndrome is. And so, although these are all in a great direction, dementia is this umbrella. And so then underneath dementia is going to be Alzheimer's, the most prevalent form, and we have Lewy body dementia, which is a hybrid between Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, frontotemporal, which has gotten a lot of press because of Bruce Willis, and vascular type dementias, and then there's going to be mixed pathologies. So in somebody that has mixed pathologies, is a monoclonal antibody going to be beneficial? Maybe.
But, I think a lot of work still needs to be done to really hone in on how these medications are going to be beneficial and what the efficacy of them will be. And with regards to Alzheimer's, we know that it's pretty multifactorial, genetic,
Yeah.
lifestyle. We know that there's neurofibrillary tangles as well as amyloid. So when you're targeting just one facet of that, being amyloid, what will the impact
There's a
actually
lot of
be?
other facets to cover there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they're covering, the new drugs cover one facet, and that's a good thing. But there are many others to cover.
Yeah.
Well, we started out this discussion talking about vitamin D and how you went into the brains of people, measured their vitamin D levels, and showed that higher levels of vitamin D are associated with lower risk of dementia. You went into the four groups, or the group of flavonols, which are rich and abundant in leafy green vegetables, and looked at how fast people's cognitive decline happens as we age, and they had a positive impact on that. And then finally, the whole mind diet as an umbrella, right? And looking at whether or not it impacts those brain plaques or amyloid plaques, and also tangles, and especially for amyloid, looks like they have an impact. And so you got all this going on here. I think so. I'm going to try and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I'm going to try and summarize here basically. So for vitamin D, so just everybody, just make sure if you happen to be vegan, dairy free, live in an area where it's hard to get outside, and on top of that, you might have darker pigment skin, then you definitely want to find a way to get some vitamin D. So always look for ways to get vitamin D. It's turning out to be very, very important, and the story gets deeper and deeper and more convincing about it. And then for flavonols, leafy green vegetables, berries, these little known, like quercetin, camphorol, quercetin, isoham, these little known molecules, right, can make a very big difference, and they're very rich in those leafy green vegetables. And don't forget to just eat the mind diet. If you want to learn more about the mind diet, where should we go? I mean, they could go to the NeuroReserve website, because there's going to be plenty on it there. And also, I'm definitely sure that Rush University has some resources on it too, right?
Yeah. Well, and Martha Claire had written a book regarding the mind diet and how it was developed, and the science that went into it. Has some really great recipes. Her daughter helped her with the recipes, and that's a really great book. I've had the opportunity to read Annie Fenn's book as well, the
Brain Health Kitchen.
Brain Health Kitchen. Yep. So again, great recipes, great just looking. And also both the manuscripts are available online as far as I know. I know sometimes if I'm on my work computer, I have access to various things, but I think they've been so impactful that they've become kind of open source. But reading through and checking out what the diet is, looking at how to score yourself is it's always really nice to just see how you stack up. And for me, I have a laminated mind diet sheet on my fridge, and I try to mark off whenever I hit my leafy greens or get my fish in for the week.
Oh man, I love it.
Veggies, and again, so I had, well, I guess, great opportunity. I am a part of the U.S. Pointer trial as well, doing lifestyle intervention for cognition. And we're focused on diet, and mind diet is one of the primary interventions. We also really emphasize physical activity, as well as cognitive training and cognitive activity, socialization, tracking cardiovascular disease risk, and kind of knowing where your lipid levels lie and blood glucose. And then even further, looking at sleep, looking at microbiome, and just this all-encompassing aspect of the whole person. And it's just really, from my perspective, I get to talk to the people as they're moving through the trial, and just wonderful success that I've seen in changes in not only objective numbers and how the person is eating and doing physical activity, but just a change in mentality, change in outlook of life. It's just really, really wonderful to see.
Yeah. So everybody, we should stay tuned. Basically, and it's going to be, it's going to take a couple more years, I bet, as the Pointer study, completes and everything's looked at. But I know that from what I understand, people that were brought into the study are people that are kind of what people would call at risk, basically.
Yes.
And so I can see how diet and exercise and maintaining, good heart health status can make a huge impact on people's lives. So that's neat.
Yeah. I mean, I had the opportunity to talk with somebody today, actually, and they were a little down about where their levels were. This was a months out, fourth cycle visit, and the individual had an LDL in the 130s roughly at the start of the trial, and dropped it to the 60s and was a little upset that they were in the 70s now. And I just said, that is phenomenal. We want your LDL level to be below 100, and you've maintained going from this, mid 120s, 130s level to the 60s, 70s, and you've maintained that across a year and a half. That is success. That iterates this lifestyle modification that we're preaching in this trial, to be able to correct behavior and make modifications, and then be able to sustain that. Because you don't want to oscillate back and forth. You want to have this solid modification that then helps your lipid levels or hemoglobin A1C, but then be able to maintain that and track and trend over time. And I had another individual, just a wonderful story, a total correction of lipid panel, lower LDL, lower triglycerides, higher HDL, lower A1C, lost about 40 pounds, even though weight isn't a part of it. Had a waist circumference of 4.5 inches smaller. So just all around, and it's a cognitive intervention trial. So, although it's lifestyle, we're looking at cognition, but all of these secondary type components and outcomes start to show up as well. So it's just really, it's wonderful to see, what happens when you tie science and support and accountability all together.
Yeah. And that goes back to the multi-factorial nature of brain health as we age. Yeah. There's just so many things involved, and if you start fixing things in that respect, you're going to start fixing all sorts of other aspects of health, and there's big benefits there, not just for our brain. Yeah. So, but well, thanks for joining, and thanks for breaking down the vitamin D results, the flavanol results, the neuropathology results for the mind diet. This has just been you've been on a tear lately. Just results after results after results. So
yeah, it's been successful. I mean, it's concerted effort between the journal and just being able to have the opportunities to speak with individuals and really translate what the science is and what our outcomes and interpretations of these associations have been. So it's been a lot of fun. And as I love to talk about this topic. I think it's it's very important to get into communities and help people understand what is beneficial, how it's beneficial, what can be done. And it's really enjoyable to see positive outcomes at the end of things.
Yeah. And we're looking forward to the new results that are going to come out this year. The year's still young. Yeah. So I'm, it'll be, I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot more information coming out this year about just deeper insights, because it's really picking up. It's just like a snowball that's growing as far as nutrition, brain health, and other lifestyle interventions.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But yeah, thanks so much, Tom. And once again, follow Thomas Holland, whether or not you're, I don't know, just keep an eye on him. might be better to keep an eye on him on Google Scholar, because there's a lot of stuff coming out every other day there. But definitely, obviously, on Instagram. If you want to learn more about the mind diet that we discussed today, or some of the nutrients in it, obviously our NeuroReserve website is gonna have plenty of information on that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to learn, you want to learn how to cook the mind diet. I mean, like Tom was saying, there's a person named Annie Fenn. She has a wonderful cookbook called The Brain Health Kitchen that just got released this year. So that's all the latest information there as well on the mind diet and how to cook very healthy. So once again, thanks everybody for joining, and Tom, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invite, and as I said, I love talking about this topic. It's obviously near and dear to me from a research perspective, near and dear from a family history perspective as well. So it's very, very important to me. I think it's important to all the researchers, and when we think about the aspects of how this impacts not only the patient but the families, the caregivers, it gives us all so much motivation to really work toward prevention and hopefully towards a cure at some point. But until then, really trying to hone in on what we can do to maintain our cognitive function. And I'll leave you with this, but I have a mentor, and he put this in one of the most elegant ways that I think I've heard. The optimal goal for us is to be in our 90s, go skiing, do whatever activity that we want, to be physically functional enough to go do the activity that we want. Finish that day, be able to have cognitive, be able to have conversation, be totally intact and just talk about things, and then go to bed that night and not wake up. So to be in our 90s and be totally physically and cognitively functional, and then go from there.
Yeah,
so,
to have a health span and a brain span that goes right up to the end of your lifespan, right? And that is just that's a gift. It's a blessing, and it's something that we should strive for. So we know there are things we can do to get us closer to that, or to move in that direction. So well, thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody who joined. I know it's rush hour right now here in the Pacific time, and also in Mountain time, I guess, and you're kind of coming out of it in Chicago. So we're gonna, this will obviously be posted, and people will be able to watch it there. So, all right. Well, have a good night, Tom.
You too.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. See you. Bye-bye.